New York never paused, not even when rain came pouring down like it meant to drown the entire city. The streets were alive, umbrellas bumping, people rushing, headlights smearing against wet asphalt. Among them, Lena Moore, 28, had no umbrella and no time to care. She sprinted down the sidewalk, sneakers splashing through puddles, her brown ponytail swinging with every hurried step. In her hand was a briefcase holding her UX design pitch, the only thing standing between her and a career-changing contract with one of the top tech corporations. "Just don't be late," Lena muttered, glancing at her watch. 12 minutes left. Just enough if nothing got in her way. But New York loved its surprises. A sleek black Bentley zoomed past, hugging the curb. Then, as if mocking her, the tires hit a deep puddle. A full wave of cold, grimy water rose up and slammed into Lena. She froze. Mud dripped from her coat, soaked into her jeans, chilled her skin. Thankfully, the briefcase was dry, but her temper wasn't. Without thinking, she stormed to the car, now idling at a red light. Bang! Bang! She pounded on the window. "Open it, now!" The tinted glass slid down. Inside sat a man, impossibly composed, unfairly handsome, and not even a flicker of regret in his gray eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked, deep voice laced with indifference. "You just turned me into roadkill," she snapped. "I have a pitch in 10 minutes and I look like I crawled out of a sewer." He raised an eyebrow, eyes calmly scanning her. "You look fine to me." "Oh, how nice. Must be easy to ignore people's problems when you live in a world made of money and glass walls." People started gathering, someone lifted a phone, recording. Lena didn't care. The man opened the door and stepped out, no umbrella, rain soaking his expensive suit. Towering over her, he locked eyes with her. Something in that gaze made her pulse stutter. "You just did something no one else dares. Banged on my window," he said, amused. Lena's eyes narrowed. "And I'll do it again if you drive like a jerk one more time." He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that turned heads. "Good. I look forward to it." She turned on her heel, walking away, rain dripping from her hair, but she could still feel his eyes on her back. Lena Moore made it just in time, soaked clothes clinging to her and her mood sour beyond repair. The receptionist directed her to the 42nd floor, where the most important pitch of her career was about to begin. Inside the elevator, she tried to fix her rain-messed hair, smooth her damp blazer, and breathe. She was here to work, not to think about some arrogant CEO with a half smile and no decency. But fate had a better punchline. As Lena entered the meeting room, a few executives were already seated. The project directors, a lead architect, and a couple of senior advisors. She nodded politely, walked to the projector, and started setting up her presentation. The door opened again, and then came silence. Julian Hart, wearing a sharp gray suit, hair slicked neatly, his presence commanded the room. His cold gray eyes swept over everyone until they landed directly on her. That stare, intense and unreadable, made Lena stiffen. Julian walked to the head of the table and sat with effortless authority. "Miss Moore," he said coolly, voice rich with subtext. "Let's hope the rain doesn't drown your presentation today." A quiet chuckle broke out. Lena clenched her jaw but didn't flinch. "Thank you, Mr. Hart," she replied, locking eyes with him. "Rain only makes me cold, not careless." Julian's lips twitched slightly. He nodded for her to begin. Lena squared her shoulders and started. Her clothes were still damp, but her voice was anything but shaky. Her design concept merged tech with fluidity. Smart lighting that adjusted with the sun, green integrated open spaces for collaboration, and soundproofed corners for focus. Every slide, every detail was calculated and clear. Julian leaned back in his chair, saying nothing, but his eyes followed everything. "How do you plan to manage Western glare in the afternoon?" he asked. "UV-coated smart glass," Lena answered instantly. "Technical specs are on page 11. Mentional costs for the hanging gardens. I've proposed an automated drip system, 30% more efficient than traditional irrigation." She answered each question quickly, precisely. The room grew quieter, more attentive. One director murmured, "She's handling Julian like a pro." When she finished, applause echoed around the room. Lena allowed herself one slow breath. "Miss Moore," Julian said as the group began gathering their things, "stay behind. I'd like a word." She paused, looking up. His expression wasn't smug anymore, but curious. "Complicated?" Lena nodded. She didn't know it yet, but she had just stepped into a chess game unlike any she'd ever played. Since the pitch meeting, Lena Moore had been officially appointed as the UX lead for Hart Nova's new headquarters, working directly with CEO Julian Hart. She wasn't thrilled, nor was she intimidated, just wary. Julian wasn't like any executive she'd ever collaborated with, unreadable, distant, and capable of making people feel small with just one glance. On their first day working together, Lena arrived on time, but Julian was already there, standing by the technical sketchboard, shirt sleeves rolled, eyes locked on floor plans. "Miss Moore," he said without turning, "glad you remembered the meeting." Lena smirked. "Sorry I didn't have a Bentley to remind me." A few architects chuckled. Julian simply raised an eyebrow, dryly adding, "Let's hope your attitude doesn't make it into the interface." She fired back, "Only my vision and design instincts." From then on, every meeting felt like a sparring match. Julian threw out near impossible tasks, full 3D renderings of the 50th floor in 48 hours, rare furniture sourcing in under a day, entire mood boards scrapped because they didn't feel emotive enough. Lena wanted to throw her laptop out a window, but she didn't back down. She delivered, again and again, dozens of calls, 3 a.m. work nights, coffee replacing blood. And when she finally presented results, Julian would nod, ever so slightly. "Acceptable." "Acceptable," Lena shot up. "Do you want me to grow wings next?" Julian remained calm. "I'd like to see you fly." She glared at him, fury in her chest. But what she couldn't admit was that every time he pushed her, she felt more alive than ever. One Friday afternoon, Lena brought a stack of reports to Julian's temporary office. As she set them down, her elbow knocked over his coffee. "Oh no," she gasped. But instead of apologizing, she burst out laughing. "So you can look flustered." Julian glanced at the spreading coffee stain on his white shirt. No anger, no irritation. He simply stood, took off his jacket, and revealed the wet shirt clinging to his frame. Lena swallowed hard, trying not to notice. "Flustered?" he echoed, stepping slightly closer. "You sure about that?" "Positive," she said, steadying her voice. "If anything, the coffee makes you look less icy." Julian chuckled, a warm, low sound that seemed to vibrate in the air. "You have a talent for chaos, Miss Moore. And you for making everything difficult." They stood just feet apart, gaze locked, like swords barely touching in an unspoken duel. Lena left the office with her heart pounding faster than she cared to admit. It was just adrenaline, she told herself. It had to be, since the coffee spill incident, neither of them brought it up again. But something had shifted, subtle, nearly imperceptible. Julian was still the demanding CEO who expected everything to be even better. Lena was still the sharp-tongued designer who refused to follow vague direction without a solid reason. But in between the back and forth, glances lingered longer. Silences didn't carry tension anymore. They carried something waiting to be said. One late evening, both stayed behind to rework a 3D render. Lena sat cross-legged on the table, laptop in her lap. Julian stood nearby, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. "You work too hard," he said, setting the cup next to her. "No one asked you to stay this late." "You're here too," Lena replied. "No one asked you either." Julian smiled. "I'm the boss. I have an excuse. And I have ambition." Silence settled between them for a few seconds. In the soft glow of the desk lamp, Lena noticed the tired look in Julian's face. Not from work, but something deeper. "Don't you ever rest?" she asked quietly. Julian arched an eyebrow, a bit surprised. Then he sat across from her, his gray eyes softening. "When I was little, my mom used to say, if you don't try harder than everyone else, you'll be left behind." Lena didn't respond. She just nodded. She understood that feeling too well. The need to always be strong because no one else was going to catch her. That night, as Julian was leaving the office, he paused at the door and turned back. "Do you go out to dinner often?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "Not when I'm still editing mock-ups at 11 p.m. "Then let me make up for it," he said. "Tomorrow, dinner's on me. We can even bring the slides if it helps." "A business dinner?" she asked. "Of course," Julian said, but his eyes said something else. Lena didn't answer right away, but when he left, she looked at the coffee cup he'd left behind, still warm. And part of her realized if this was a game, she was already in it. "It's just a business dinner." Lena repeated the words in her head as she stood in front of her mirror. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pinned in a soft bun, a touch of lipstick to keep her from looking washed out. Julian Hart had sent her an email inviting her to dinner at a high-end midtown restaurant. The subject? The final phase project review. Very professional, but something about the wording wasn't entirely business. She stepped into the restaurant on the 50th floor. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, soft piano music floated through the air. Julian was already seated by the window, wearing a deep blue shirt with the top 2 buttons undone. When he saw her, he rose and pulled out her chair. So gentlemanly, it made her pause. "Miss Moore," he said softly, "you look different tonight." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Different because I'm not soaked or coffee stained?" Julian chuckled, his gaze warming. "Different in a way that almost made me forget what I was going to say." She smirked, flipping open her folder. "Let's stick to business, Mr. Hart. I didn't come here to be flattered." He lifted both hands. Business first, compliments later. Dinner went surprisingly smoothly. They discussed meeting room flow, meditation zones, how to optimize UX for hybrid teams. But every time Julian looked at her a little too long, Lena had to force herself to stay focused. Everything was under control until a familiar voice broke the rhythm. "Lena Moore, didn't expect to see you here." She froze. Ethan, her ex. His arm was around a blonde woman, his eyes scanning her dress like he was appraising her. "Didn't think this place was in your budget," he said with a smirk. "Trying to impress someone?" Lena opened her mouth, but Julian was already rising. "She doesn't need to impress anyone," he said, voice low but razor sharp. He stepped beside Lena and gently placed a hand on her back. "She has me." The entire restaurant seemed to go silent. Ethan blinked. "And you are?" "Julian Hart." 2 words, enough to make Ethan go pale. After he left, Lena yanked her arm away, turning to Julian with a scowl. "Who said you could interfere in my personal life?" Julian didn't budge, only smiled. "That's the 2nd time you've yelled at me." "Are you insane?" she hissed, eyes still blazing. "I'm serious," he replied, gaze softening. "I didn't like seeing someone treat you like that. That's all." Lena didn't answer, because her heart had just skipped a beat. Rain poured over the empty field where Hart Nova's new office complex was planned. Lena Moore stood in the tall grass, holding an iPad with the site map, a thin umbrella barely shielding her from the biting wind. She wasn't okay. Her head was burning, vision slightly blurred, throat aching, but Lena hated looking weak, especially in front of Julian Hart. He stood a few steps away, speaking with the project manager. In a gray sweater and jeans, he looked less like the intimidating CEO, but his eyes were just as sharp. "Miss Moore," he called, turning to her. "Thoughts on the Eastern Zone? I want it open, but with some privacy." Lena swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "The East Side is higher, ideal for a rooftop garden. But the foundation needs reinforcement to prevent erosion." She pointed out into the field, but her hand trembled. She quickly hid it in her pocket. Julian paused, just a moment longer than usual. His gaze landed on her, not cold this time, but concerned. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly fine," Lena replied quickly, turning away. "Just the rain." But her body betrayed her. Minutes later, her head spun, legs wobbled. She sat on a nearby rock, pretending to review documents. but her vision blurred further. And then everything faded. When she opened her eyes again, she was being held, strong arms steadying her before she hit the wet ground. "Lena," Julian's voice was close, low, urgent. "What the hell were you thinking?" She heard the rain hitting his clothes, felt his grip tighten around her, as if afraid she'd slip away. "You're burning up," he muttered. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice was so faint she barely believed it herself. Julian didn't argue. He simply lifted her into his arms, not wasting another second. She didn't protest, couldn't. Her head rested on his shoulder and his breath brushed softly against her hair. And in that moment, she didn't feel cold anymore. She felt safe. Monday morning, the atmosphere at Hart Nova felt unusually heavy. Lena stepped into the office and instantly felt the weight of every gaze. Conversations dropped to whispers as she passed. One sentence reached her ears like a blade. "Slept with the boss and landed the contract? That was fast." She froze. Her fingers clenched around her blueprints. No one met her eyes. The sting of humiliation rose like bile in her throat. She didn't cry, didn't speak. She quietly packed her things and typed an email. Brief, cold, without emotion. Julian received it during a board meeting. He read the single sentence. "For personal reasons, I am withdrawing from the project. Thank you for the opportunity." He stood abruptly. Meetings canceled. Within an hour, Julian traced the rumor's source. A bitter employee in Sofia. He fired them both, without hesitation. That afternoon, Julian stood outside Lena's apartment. His shirt was still wrinkled from the rush. When she opened the door, her eyes were colder than the wind. "What are you doing here?" "You can't walk away like this," Julian said. "I won't let anyone hurt you, not again." Lena looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You're a little late, Julian." She tried to close the door, but something in his voice stopped her cold. There was no arrogance, no control, just truth. Lena was about to close the door when Julian placed his hand on the frame. His eyes, no longer guarded, held something raw, something real. "I was wrong not to speak up sooner, but I wasn't wrong about you." She stared at him, her heart bruised but still beating for something she couldn't quite name. "You don't need me to succeed, Lena, but I need you to feel alive." For the first time, he didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man, proud, lonely, and finally learning how to let someone in. She exhaled and stepped aside, leaving the door open. "I'll come back to the project," she said. "But Julian, don't make me regret it." He nodded gently. "I won't." The door closed softly behind Julian, shutting out the rain and the ache of things left unsaid. Lena poured 2 cups of tea. The scent of ginger curled in the air, soothing and quiet, like the silence growing between them. They sat on the couch, not facing each other, but not apart either. "I used to think," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that someone like you would never admit they're wrong." Julian stared ahead for a moment, then slowly turned toward her. "I used to think I had to be right to earn respect," he replied. "But I've realized sometimes all you need is honesty to keep the one thing that matters most." She didn't speak, just looked at him, no longer angry, but wary, like someone who'd been burned but still carried warmth. Julian continued, his voice low but steady. "Lena, you don't need me to shine, Lena. You already burn bright, even in the rain. But I need you. You make me pause. You make me realize that success means nothing if there's no one to share it with." Lena smiled, softly, barely there, but real. Maybe she'd waited to hear those words longer than she realized. "Okay," she said, turning toward him fully. "I'm coming back, not for the job, but because I choose this." Julian nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I won't let you regret it." Julian didn't say anything more. He just reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. That night, 2 cups of tea sat between them on her couch, quietly steaming. One promise kept, one beginning resumed. After weathering their shared storms, Julian and Lena gradually rebuilt their trust in the wake of their heartfelt confessions. That very night, right after Lena resolved to return to the project, they never parted ways again. They spent the late hours together in their small apartment, sharing their pains, hopes, and a renewed determination to change their fate. A year passed, and time seemed both gentler and more meaningful. Their apartment now radiated the colors of a new life, walls adorned with photos capturing unforgettable moments, from intense workdays to tender, quiet evenings together. They had carved out a small oasis of warmth amidst the bustling city. One gentle evening, after tidying up from a long day's work, Lena opened the balcony door and looked out at the shimmering cityscape. Streetlights, twinkling stars, and the soft patter of rain painted a vivid picture of hope. Julian sat beside her in an old, familiar armchair, his hand softly resting on hers as if to offer silent reassurance. "I used to fear that without that moment, you might have walked away forever," he said in a warm, steady tone. "But now, you're someone I never want to lose." Lena gazed into his sincere eyes, recalling the moments when her emotions had once overwhelmed her, and wondered if he truly cared for her. "You know," she whispered, "I always remember your voice, the promise that we would find each other, no matter how many storms life sent our way." He smiled, his eyes glistening in the moonlight. "We've faced so many challenges, from that fateful collision to horrible rumors, but it was all meant to bring us to this very moment, where we build our future together." Lena rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a comforting warmth spread through her. "Our love truly is like a beautiful collision, born from raindrops and turned into the most magical thing in this crowded city." They sat in silence, cherishing the profound union of their past, their present, and a bright future. A future where every old scar had become a testament to growth and enduring love. Outside, the city still rushed on, but for once, New York had paused, just long enough for two people to fall in love.